Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Live Chat with James here at the Satellite TV studios in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'd like to welcome you back and remember that you can be a part of the conversation by adding your comments to the comment section. You can also throw topics up in the comment section if there is something that you would like to talk about. And of course, you can always make suggestions for stories for future episodes as well if you wish us to do some research and create a news story or, common interest story that you'd like us to cover. So let's jump right into the headlines though, folks. It appears that the Liberal Party of Canada has taken further steps against Chandra, Arya. Now, this individual was running or has been representing the Nepean area in Ontario, Canada as the Member of Parliament. Now, there have been ongoing concerns about his statements against the Sikh community as well as the Khalistan movement, a peaceful, non-binding referendum that has been happening worldwide, and he, of course, has made it out to feed the company line of the government of India and Narendra Modi in that they claim that the Khalistan movement is a terrorist movement, and that is not true at all. Even world leaders that have recently met with representatives of the India government and India media have straight out said that this is a matter of people expressing their freedom of speech as well as their democratic right to have non-binding referendums on different issues. And that is where it differs in India, where they see it as a separatist movement that is a risk to the unity of that country. And therefore, because they do speak out against Narendra Modi and because they are looking to hold this peaceful, non-binding referendum, that is labeled as terrorism as far as the definition in India. So again, in the Western world, we talk about terrorism and we have different visions in our head of very serious and violent actions, but that is not the case when it comes to India. They have their National Security Administration there, in which, again, just speaking out against the government can label you as a terrorist. So that is what the definition is, or the difference is. Now, Chandra, Arya has spent time over in India meeting with Narendra Modi, and this was also at a time when the Canadian government was speaking out against the government of India in their potential involvement in the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. Canada and India relations at that time were very strained, as they still are today. But Chandra, Arya did have these backdoor meetings with Narendra Modi. Now, in previous reports, Chandra, Arya had said that it was a personal trip. It was not government related. And yet today, in his, or actually I guess yesterday now, because we're after midnight, but in his latest statement says that he never had to ask for permission or never did ask for permission to meet with world leaders previously, and that he was there as a representative or an MP of the government of Canada. So again, this is contradictory to his own statements in the past. Now, with the recent foreign interference report from the Foreign Interference Commission, there were concerns brought up by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, also known as CSIS. They brought concerns up about Chandra, Arya as well, with his links to India and his potential involvement in the foreign interference and election interference here within our Canadian borders. As such, the concerns have also been raised by various members of the Liberal Party and their administration. As such, there were statements made by Chandra, Arya in the past several months that gave even more concern and caused them to suspend him from the Liberal Party. And now it has come out in breaking news that they have now booted him from the Liberal Party altogether. That means that in the upcoming election, if he does continue to run as a candidate in the federal election, which will take place on April the 28th, he will need to do so as an independent. There is also the option of him jumping parties to the Conservatives, the NDP, or the Bloc Québécois, but I don't see that happening. It's not very likely, especially considering the Bloc Québécois doesn't really operate outside of Quebec in terms of their candidates. Now, Chandra Arya has been a polarizing issue within the communities and claims that he represents the Hindu community and he is within his rights to speak out against what he refers to as the Sikh separatism movement and the Sikh terrorists, which are, again, false narratives based on the talking points of India by the BJP government, the RAW agency, which is the Indian intelligence organization, as well as the RSS. More in line is that Chandra Arya is representing a Hindu extremist movement in his rhetoric, as well as his potential interference within Canadian political circles and his backdoor meetings with Narendra Modi. So again, he has been removed as a Liberal candidate from the federal upcoming election. And again, Chandra Arya will no longer represent the Liberals as he is the MP for Nepean County in Ontario. Again, with that riding, it is unlikely that he will secure his seat once again as an incumbent, even if he runs as an independent. So we'll see what happens from there, but we will be watching this story closely. Coming up Monday on Perspectives on Satellite TV, we will be going into much deeper reporting of the story and the history and controversy surrounding Chandra Arya. So we'll cover that again on Monday on Perspectives. But again, he will be not running as a Liberal in the upcoming election with only about just over 4 weeks to go before that election. It will be interesting to see who takes his place in the Liberal riding there in Nepean County, Ontario. Now, just as a side note of interest, Nepean County in Ontario, in Nepean Lake and other areas across Canada that have been named Nepean are actually after Sir or Lord Nepean, who was the British representative in Bombay back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Sir or Lord Nepean, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure which to refer to him by, so my apologies for that ignorance, but regardless, he was the governor of Bombay, and that was during the colonialization and the rule by the British and, of course, the king. So, again, that is just a side note that that is where Nepean County and Nepean Lake and other Nepean references across Canada get that name from. Now, as we continue on to other stories that are hitting the headlines, of course, we know the big story out of the United States right now is what they are referring to as SignalGate. Yes, it was the confidential or secret information that was released on a Signal app by various levels, various members at high levels of the United States government, including the Vice President J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, and others who were discussing military operations and strategic plans and timelines in which the U.S. government was planning to attack the Houthis in Yemen. Donald Trump seems to be totally oblivious to the reality that this is not only an infraction against the Espionage Act of the United States, but also the true risks that could have been posed by this activity. Now, we all know that if you've been following the news, you understand that a reporter and editor from the Atlantic magazine was also looped in on this chat. Now, the chat discussed exact times, methods, and other actions that were going to be taken by the U.S. government, by the military, whether on the ground or via airstrikes and so forth. And this put the lives of U.S. service members at risk. And for the for Pete Hegseth and the administration from Trump all the way down to downplay it, to state that it's a non-issue, is really, really ignorant of the facts. Now, we know that there is conflicting information coming from all parties involved. There are people who are claiming that they were not on the chat, or denying or not answering when asked directly if certain initials belonged to them, if they were in the chat room, and so forth. And then the government is also stating that it was not top secret, that it wasn't, security risks by having this conversation about U.S. military action on an unsecured line from the U.S. government. Now, Trump seems to think that Signal is an approved app by the government of the United States for top secret information, which is not the case at all. It is not approved for such top level communications, especially considering the fact that one of the individuals may have actually been in the Kremlin at the time of these conversations on their phones. Now, Trump also goes on to claim that they may not have been on a private phone. They may have been on a government phone at the time. But from my understanding is that the Signal app does not work on government phones because it is not secure. The real question here is, why were they having this conversation on private phones on a Signal network instead of a military encrypted network? Now, this is also going to lead me to think that there is the fact that they were trying to circumvent certain accountability factors that would come with official records had they have used the official government channels of communication. Now, we're not saying that the attacks or the war plans or anything happening outside of the of what was legal or a reasonable attack or situation. But what I am saying is clearly that this is a breach of the Espionage Act. They should be held accountable, and for the U.S. government to continue to downplay it is ignorant, for one, and number two, it's a slap in the face to all of the service members, past and present, who have worked tirelessly and put their lives on the line, and some of them losing their lives, in order to secure the borders of the United States of America, in addition to peacekeeping around the world. Now, troops from all different sectors or all different parts of the world, whether it be through NATO or the United Nations or other partnerships, have come shoulder to shoulder to stand proud and true with the American troops. And when we see this ignorance and lack of concern about security breaches coming out of the very top of the U.S. administration, it gives pause to all other nations. Now, if we were to be involved in activities, which we often are, whether it's training exercises, peacekeeping missions, and otherwise with the U.S. troops, where we stand shoulder to shoulder to this day, and they are giving away secure information that could place lives of our service members at risk, then that is a very big concern. It appears that the Five Eyes nations are also looking at how the U.S. handles intelligence and what type of services that they're using, because Trump also goes on to state that this is a common practice in the U.S. military and other departments of the United States government, that they use Signal or other apps in a matter of convenience. And let me tell you, protecting the lives of soldiers, of those giving their lives, it's not about convenience. It's not about, well, we'll use this unsecure app because I want to get this message out in a hurry. How about the fact that you take your time to make sure that you do what you are supposed to do, and that is protect the lives and the integrity of the service members. The downplay is just pathetic. And then you have Carolyn Levitt, or as I refer to her, Bargain Basement Barbie, the U.S. administration and the White House press secretary, who gets all ruffled and pissed off because reporters want answers. And as they keep asking the same question, she gets flustered, saying that she's already answered it and that Donald Trump hasn't changed his opinion on the matter. And it just goes on, where she actually walked out of a press briefing with the media because they were trying to press for answers. It appears that even though the the United States White House press corps has been taken over by the White House, where it used to be operated by the Press Corps Association. And they would then do the removal or the addition of certain members of the press to the press corps to cover the White House, to cover the president, and to cover these issues and situations. But instead what's happened is that the White House is now taking it over so that they can try to pad the press room with people friendly to Donald Trump and his administration, and to really repeat the company line of the U.S. government. Now, the press corps is not supposed to be made up of people who are appointed or allowed access by the running government, which in this case is the Trump administration. It's supposed to be nonpartisan, and it's supposed to be representative of different news agencies and news journalists from around the world. By Trump and his crew taking possession of the rotation of who's in the White House for the press coverage is again trying to block media access to the truth and to hold the politicians and the administration accountable. And that is why there is freedom of the press. The freedom of the press in a democracy is to hold the candle, or to hold the torch to the feet of those who are elected to represent and have the best interests of a nation at hand and at heart. When the politicians are able to circumvent the rule of law and they turn around and cherry pick who's going to be able to ask what questions in the press briefings, that is totally against the freedom of the press and what the foundational principles were based on. And that's got to stop. Now, when you look at the involvement, it's not only the U.S. government. It's also about foreign leader visits to the White House and different press briefings that take place. Now, you can look at Narendra Modi as a prime example. As he's in the White House, and when he had a joint press release or press briefing with the White House staff and administration, including Donald Trump, again, they cherry-picked the reporters to be able to make sure that Narendra Modi was not having his feet held to the fire to answer questions about the lack of respect for the minorities and the human rights abuses that are taking place in India. There are a lot of issues in India that need to be dealt with before India can be given a pass to the big boys table at the international associations and committees. And that is being brushed aside. A big reason for that also can be the money that is laying on the table by the Indian oligarchs when it comes to all of the friendly and friends of Narendra Modi. Now, are they going to funnel money to Donald Trump? It's quite possible. Are they doing it now? It is also possible. It's also possible that as the Ukrainian leader, Vladimir Zelensky, was in the White House and they embarrassed and humiliated him in the Oval Office in front of the press. That was fully staged by J.D. Vance and by Donald Trump, among others. Why was there a member of the Russian media given access to the White House, to the Oval Office, in such a situation when even people from the Ukraine media were not given access? That leads to question the motivations and the reasoning behind Donald Trump and a lot of the decisions that he is making. And again, it's got to stop. There has to be the freedom of the press and respect for the media. When we look at this current scandal with the use of Signal for an app of communications within the U.S. government and such high-reaching officials, and the breach of that protocol of the Espionage Act, and putting the lives of soldiers at risk, let's also keep in mind that this is something that if you were a soldier in the U.S. military, whether it is Army, Navy, Air Force, it doesn't matter. If you did this, you would be up in front of a court-martial. You'd be up in front of a judge. An advocate would be there to represent you. But again, there wouldn't be much for you to argue because you were breaching the Espionage Act But again, it doesn't matter because it is the high-level officials in the Trump administration who broke the Espionage Act and put lives at risk. So again, he, instead of holding them accountable, and why it was that Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic was brought into this chat, instead, they turn around and they attack The Atlantic magazine. They attack Jeffrey Goldberg, stating that he is a... they've called him so many different words, including a scumbag. The Trump administration calling out an editor and a reporter journalist as a scumbag because he was brought into this chat. They are trying to make it seem as though he breached security, that he is responsible, and he is the one that requested to be in the chat room. And that is not the case. High-ups in that chat thread were the ones that invited him in. They brought him on board to this chat and shared secrets in this chat room that should never have been made public. They call him a scumbag and, and his magazine failing and so forth. And that's fine. They can have their opinion. And that is just it. It is their ill-informed opinion that is meant to take away from the fact that they breached the Espionage Act. And I can't say that enough times. The fact is that had he have been a scumbag, had he have been a journalist with no integrity or ethics, he would have released those text messages immediately. He would have had the scoop that the biggest news agencies would have died to have. And instead, he took it upon himself to hold back, to not release that information because he knew damn well that what was going on was wrong. He knew that this was unsecured. He knew that he could risk the lives of the service members if he released the details that he had been privy to. This is just another way in which the Trump administration is trying to push the responsibility onto others, to distract the American public, and hope that they will forget about this incident in a week's time and move on to the next bullshit story that's pushed by Bargain Basement Barbie and the rest of the Trump administration. And let's face it, this is unacceptable. Now, the former administration is what the other way that Trump's people are trying to deflect the responsibility of their actions. They are blaming the Biden administration for not going after the Houthis, for not attacking Yemen, for not doing this, for not doing that. But the fact of it is that the responsibility of this data breach and of this top security information potentially falling in the wrong hands is solely on the shoulders of the Trump government, for Trump, for Hegseth, for J.D. Vance, and the others involved. Plain and simple. They knew that they were on an app that had been targeted by Chinese and Russian agents trying to hack into it to gain information from U.S. high-level individuals. And with them knowing damn well that that app was the target of Russian and Chinese agencies, then that should have given them even more pause for warning to get the hell off that app and use the proper encrypted communication channels available through the U.S. military and the United States government. For them to continue to be on this path that no top secret information was shared is plain and outright lying to everyone the world over. And that is proven because now we have seen some of the text information that has been released. It has been released, and even though it has, and it named the exact date, time, what the attacks entailed, what methods were being used, what weapons were being used, and the U.S. government still is in denial like an ostrich with their head in the sand, saying, oh, but there was nothing classified there. Oh, we didn't risk any lives. And instead, they're focusing on the outcome, saying, oh, well, you won't have an issue with it if the mission goes as successful as we anticipate it to over the next several weeks. And it's like, that is, again, another cop-out. Regardless as to the outcome, the fact that that information was not given to the Yemens or the Houthis before the attack took place is totally besides the fact. The point is that it potentially could have. It could have cost soldiers their lives. They could have walked into an ambush. They could have been targeted without any warning. And that is the concern. To say that they haven't released any top secret information, well, we don't know, because we don't know what other conversations have happened on the Signal app. Let's take that into account. We don't know what other information they've discussed, whether it's plans against Russia, or about the Ukraine war, or about China and Taiwan, or Iran, or Israel and Gaza. I mean, the list goes on and on. We don't know what they've been sharing on this app and who's been listening. Have the Russians and the Chinese, or even the Iranians, been able to breach into that Signal app as we know they've been trying to do? Are they sitting there monitoring all of this information and making plans to counter such actions by the US government? We don't know. And we know that there's no transparency and truth coming out of the White House because, let's face it, Donald Trump doesn't only need the depends for the shit that comes out of his ass, but also the shit that comes out of his mouth. And that is a fact. We cannot trust the US government to give us the truth and the facts and to run a proper investigation into this breach. Now, we've also seen that they are bringing Mr. Elon Musk and his cronies into the mix. They are going to be investigating how this journalist got onto Signal and how this happened. Well, the facts are already there. He was invited in by people in the chat. We don't need, first of all, for Elon Musk to tell us that. We already know, and it's been admitted by certain individuals in the chat room that this individual was invited into the chat room. Secondly, why the hell is Elon Musk and his retarded Doge team investigating something of a breach of an Espionage Act? That should be left up to the Secret Service, to the FBI, to all of the people who are employed by the government of the United States of America to investigate crimes, to investigate security breaches, to investigate threats against the nation. That is who should be investigating, not Elon Musk. The last time I checked, first of all, Doge is the biggest joke in the history of the United States. But further to that, they have no authorization, no investigation training. They may know technology, but at the end of the day, they do not have the ability to have a full-scale investigation. Are his Doge teams privy to the high-level security clearance that would be involved in being able to run a proper investigation? Will they be able to find out what other information has been released by these individuals on that chat room and on that app? And further to that, if they even are able to access the history, the chat history between different administration staff and political placements, if they don't have the security clearance, why are they going to be accessing that data as well? We already know that they've accessed the Treasury Department data, and what is happening with all of the data that Doge is accessing? I have a feeling that a lot of it is being fed into the Grok AI system that Elon Musk owns. Because you know what? That data helps him to train his AI systems and gives him an unfair competitive advantage over other AI systems and other machine learning processes. I think that that information is being used so that he can build his AI systems with your personal secured data. And that should be concerning, because not only does the Treasury Department have access to your data as an American citizen, they have access to corporate details, to your spending details, to your tax details, your personal details. They have access to all of that, but they also have access to information on foreign citizens through different tax treaties and other government-linked systems. So again, to bring Doge in to investigate this scandal is inappropriate, and it should be illegal as well. They do not have the security clearance to be handling top secret information that may or may not have been discussed in these Signal chats outside of the one that we know about. So again, where is the accountability in the U.S. government and the Donald Trump administration? It seems that even more and more Americans, many of them, not all of them, but but there are many who continue to support the MAGA movement and the Donald Trump administration no matter what he does wrong. If Donald Trump says, oh, it's okay that they broke the Espionage Act, then I guess it must be okay, and that is unacceptable. Americans need to grow back their balls and start holding accountable those in the White House and the administration from coast to coast, and that's the reality of it. When you turn around and you look at this as a country outside of the US, you have to shake your head, because let me tell you, this would never have been acceptable under the Biden administration, under the Reagan administration, under any other historical administration in the history of the United States of America. America is going down the shitter, and you know what? People have got to stop pulling the handle of that giant toilet. You need to save your country from this mess, from what's becoming a dictatorship, and from a White House administration that's going to do nothing but attack the mainstream media and alternative media because they are not cozying up to the Trump agenda and the Trump message. And that is a concern. Again, we talked about it earlier. When you have freedom of the press, the reason for that is to hold elected officials accountable for actions that they partake in. The freedom of the press is there to hold those to account when they are acting outside of the parameters of their authority or their office. And that is a big part of democracy. The media plays a major role. And for him to turn around and start accusing, very reputable news agencies as being illegal, as being non-credible, just because they speak out against him and try to hold him accountable for all of his bullshit, that in itself should be illegal. It is trying to quash the freedom of the press, the freedom of expression, and the right to all Americans to know the unfettered truth. And that is where we are at. And so when we look at that, there's just so many different things. And as I said, there's a potential that Steve Whitekoff, or whatever his name is, I might have gotten that wrong, but regardless, he was in Russia, potentially in the Kremlin, when he was using this Signal app. Now, Donald Trump says that, he was communicating on a government-secured line or open area of communication that was secured by the United States government. And I don't believe that to be true in the Kremlin. I do not believe it to be true in Russia. And I do not believe it to be true in the simple fact that other reports come out and say that you cannot use Signal on a government computer, on a government phone or hand device, and so forth. So obviously he was using his personal cell phone, if you go by those reports. And for these individuals to be using personal phones instead of government phones just again reiterates and reinforces my claim that they were doing it in order to circumvent accountability and to not have official government records of their chats, of their communications and their text streams on that issue. So again, other things that they've talked about on that were calling Europeans a bunch of freeloaders. Now, Donald Trump talks about them being freeloaders, and he talks about so many different things and trying to really just push the narrative away from truth. And that is his common goal, is to not allow people to know the truth or to take attention away from all of his misgivings and all of his corruption that's happening around him. And if you don't believe that the U.S. government has reached its peak of corruption, it must be because you know there's a lot more to come. Now, when we take a look at that, it is in the best interest of the United States of America to force an impeachment of both Trump, Vance, and others at the highest levels. But whether or not that will happen, we don't know, because of the fact that Donald Trump seems to have so many Americans fooled by this whole administration that it is disgusting. They are believing the false information and stats that are being pushed out by Trump and by Elon Musk and others. When you look at the Doge reports of how much they claim to be saving when they post them online, there is very clear evidence that these are false numbers. Some of them just pulled out of the sky. Others are exaggerated. Others that count in money that's been spent in the last 10 years that isn't even on, it's not even a factor anymore. It's been spent, it's done, it's over. But they are claiming that they are saving this money from taxpayers when it's not even the truth. If you really want to know what's going on in the U.S., start doing research and stop listening to Bargain Basement Barbie as she appears in the White House press briefing room and the others that are feeding all of the lies to confuse Americans and the world. And that's what it's all about. It's about causing a distraction to take your attention away from the real facts of what's happening in the United States of America. And that includes tariffs. Now, tariffs are going to destroy the U.S. economy. If it doesn't take you into recession, it's only going to take you into a depression. And that is the reality of what's going to happen with tariffs. The tariffs are not going to bring all of this money from foreign governments into the United States. The truth is that you, as the American taxpayer, for my American watching friends, you are the ones that are going to be paying the billions of dollars that Trump says the tariffs are raising, because you are the one that pays for it, not the foreign governments, not the foreign corporations. It is a tax on items coming into the U.S. That is why the American citizens are the ones that are going to be paying up the tens of billions of dollars into the U.S. coffers that Trump says is coming from other countries. But no, it's not. It's coming from the working class American citizens who are already struggling with inflation, with the cost of eggs, with the taxes and the energy costs and so forth. And that's who's going to pay the cost of tariffs and not the foreign countries. Now, is it going to impact foreign countries? Absolutely it is. It's going to hit the Canadian economy here in Canada, and it's going to hit the economies in Europe, in the UK, in China. It's going to hit the GDP. It's going to hit the unemployment rates. It's going to have worldwide impacts. Like a pebble in the water, the waves, they travel, and they have a much larger and wider reaching impact than what people realize. When you look at the tariffs, they are bad for America. They are bad for the foreign nations. And again, they are going to be a detriment to the success of any furtherment or future success of the U.S. in the immediate time. And that is a scary, scary notion. Now, when you look at Donald Trump also trying to push the foreign nations to spend more on military, whether it's through NATO or otherwise, of course, this is a logical and reasonable request. It is something that should be happening and should have been going on for many years. The fact is that many nations, including mine, have been underpaying for NATO, and that needs to be changed. We have a goal to reach our commitments and to bypass them, or not bypass them, but to further our goals at a higher level. But that is a time, an action that'll take place over time. And I think that needs to be a much quicker issue and more pressing. And I believe that the incoming Canadian government will see that as well. One thing that Donald Trump is not talking about, though, is that, yes, the European Union, Canada, and other countries are definitely increasing spending on military. They understand the urgency. But it's not because Donald Trump has asked them to or insisted that they do it. Instead, it's despite him. It is the fact that not only are Canadians and Europeans and others increasing the spending, they are now taking that out of the U.S. in their GDP and their international trade. The big part that people don't understand is that when you are spending on NATO committed targets, you are building up your military. You're not putting it all in a warehouse in Switzerland and saying, okay, this is for NATO. No, it is about building up your capabilities to protect your nation and to honor commitments that we have with NATO. So we can all come together in times of need and times of trouble and come together to fight the threats that we see. Now, what you may not realize is that between 1/3 and 2/3 of military spending on through NATO, depending on the country, and but the lowest end will say averaging is 1/3 of that money is spent in the United States of America by foreign governments. So governments such as Britain, such as Canada, such as Australia and others, they spend those dollars buying from American military manufacturers and contractors. Now, instead, they are taking that money elsewhere. They're taking tens of billions of dollars and quite realistically $1 trillion over the next several years out of the U.S. economy, and they are not going to be bringing that back in most cases. Canada is reevaluating the current commitment of the F-35s, the purchases there, because the F-35 Lightning is such a disaster. Not only do we have concerns about the reliability of the United States now in securing armaments and weapons, military vehicles and aircraft, there's a big concern about the commitment of supplying parts and other technology, software updates and so forth down the line, because that's something that the US could threaten to withhold. So therefore, Canada and likewise other nations now are going to be buying outside of the US. They're not going to buy from the United States because they have concerns about that longevity of the commitments and the reliability of the United States of America. And that is a sad day in world history. Now, when we look at this as a totality of impacts, when it comes to the F-35 Lightning, this has been marred by just a litany of problems, whether it is reliability, whether it's software problems, whether it is gaining parts and materials, or just so many different issues that have caused the F-35 Lightning to be so far over budget and underperforming. It has not hit the targets in terms of the building and the advancement and the supply that they are supposed to be having. Instead, the US government has been pouring billions upon billions into it to a point that it's over $1 trillion for the F-35 Lightning, and it still hasn't been able to work its way into being a credible option for military use. Now, if you take into account the fact that Donald Trump has now also announced the development and moving forward with Boeing as opposed to Lockheed Martin, who's developing the F-35 Lightning, Boeing is going to be providing the new technology and development of the F-47. 47, of course, coming from the number in terms of Donald Trump being the 47th president of the United States of America. Now, this is another way to push your attention away from the failed F-35 fiasco and the $1 trillion that's been lost there. Now, what happens is that when the US government contracts them to develop new technology, whether it's fighter jets or whether it is drones or anything else, the US government puts forward all kinds of money for that in hopes that when the technology is proven, they'll be able to sell it to other markets around the world. When they do that, they are able to recapture some of that expense on the R&D and the development aspects of those fighter jets or other technology. With the boondoggle and fiasco that the F-35 has become, this is very unlikely that the F-47 would be seen as a viable option for countries around the world when right now they're looking to buy anything but American military contracts, military equipment, munitions, and so forth. And that is a major problem because now you're looking at not only has the F-35 not come to fruition where it should be, but the F-47 is just going to be another boondoggle of a waste of money that will probably never see the light of day. And they just won't pull the plug. It's, you know, they look at it and they just say, okay, we put so much money into the R&D and the development so far, we don't want to pull the plug because then we lose that. And instead they just start throwing good money after bad, and that's where that F-35 project is now. Just a big, big money pit that we'll never see recovery of those costs, especially since Donald Trump has pushed the international community away from buying any type of military equipment from the United States of America if there is any other option available in the world. And of course, we know that the European Union is looking to develop their own technology now instead of relying so much on the US. And that is going to cost jobs, it's going to cost the economy, and again, contribute even further to the demise of the American government. Now, we can move on to other issues around the world, and that is to send our thoughts and our best wishes out to the people of South Korea. South Korea right now in certain regions are seeing just catastrophic wildfires. In one area alone, several dozen people have died from the wildfires in South Korea. Hundreds of others have been injured, as well as tens of thousands forced to flee their homes, to flee the ravaging fires that are moving so quickly across certain areas of South Korea. The firefighting applications and the firefighters are working night and day tirelessly to try and get these fires under control. And as a result, one helicopter pilot has been lost as well. His life was taken as a result of a crash while he was trying to get a grip on one of the fire lines. Again, our thoughts and our prayers go out to all of the people of South Korea. For our viewers, I encourage you to keep up on the developments of the wildfires in that area. It's not an area that most people think about when they hear about wildfires. They usually typically think about Canada, the US, Australia, and let me tell you, it is a global issue. And again, our thoughts go out to everybody in South Korea impacted by the wildfires that are burning there. Once again, folks, you've been watching Live Chat with James. I appreciate you taking the time to join us for this program. And we invite you again tomorrow night around the same time, which is about 1 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, to join us on this live chat. We'll be back again tomorrow night. Until then, thank you for watching. This is James Kuzno coming to you from the studios at ProPix TV in Vancouver, British Columbia. Stay safe, everyone.